Hello buddy, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.9 support tier list. So you can find timestamps in the description as well as a link to this Google Doc if you want to follow along. I am going to try to make this a bit faster as I'm doing with all of my videos. I did get my patch notes a little bit faster than I have in the past, but I would still like to shave it down even more. So once again, we're going to aim for 30 minutes to an hour on this, maybe even shorter. We'll see, but I want to make sure that I get through this. So I'm going to focus on stuff that's sort of changed recently and not as much on why champions are historically really powerful. I'll touch on that a little bit, but I say very similar stuff every patch notes for a lot of the top picks like Janna, like Nami. So I'm going to try to move through those a little bit faster so that we have more time for some people that are down the bottom of the list. Yeah, if you haven't checked out my patch notes video, I've got it linked for you here in the description. Be sure to look at that. There's not a ton that's going to affect support. In terms of this, I mean, the big changes were to mana management primarily for the mid lane. Now, tier users that are support are going to get hurt pretty badly on this. That's primarily Taric and Sona. Taric really has to get tier because he has to go tier into tanky stuff, usually like a Knight's Vow or something like that. He can get redemption for his mana early, but that makes him very squishy early on. So redemption's all right on him, but it makes him very squishy. As far as Sona, Sona can get redemption comfortably early on, but that means that she's going to be slower on Ardent Sensor, and if you want to rush Ardent first, then you're not going to have enough mana to do the kinds of things that she wants to do. So she really liked to go something like tier into Ardent, and then later on, you know, pick up things like redemption and either Athene's or Mikhail's, and then you could just sell the tier later on in the game. Or if it was super late, you could turn into an Archangel's. But either way, those two champions will definitely be hurt. Tier was an interesting option sometimes on Nami and Karma if you were going to have extended laning phases, or if you wanted to go for an Ardent first, so the tier plus Ardent. Once again, pretty good combo because you don't have to get redemption for that. Saves you a little bit of gold so that you can get Ardent Sensor faster as second item without sacrificing all of your mana management early on. So that's not really going to be an option anymore. Those champions have other ways they can get around this. You know, they can buy just a couple of extra fairy charms early and then turn those into redemption later. So it's not going to matter too much for people that aren't Sona and Taric that are popular supports. So I don't think it's a huge deal, but on those champions, it's really, really bad. I talked about it in the patch notes. It's catastrophic, I think, for the management of those champions. Now, Fiendish Codex and a lot of its complementary items are also going to get a buff here. So you get 5 extra ability power on Fiendish Codex. You get a Twin Shadows buff, 70 extra ability power. You have a reduced cost on Seeker's Arm Guard, and then the total item that gets built out of Twin Shadows retains that 5 AP. I don't remember where they say that here, but basically Hourglass gets an additional 5 AP. Builds out of Fiendish, and Banshee's Veil gets an additional 5 AP. Okay, here it is. Yeah, it says right here. So anyone that uses Hourglass is going to like this. So as far as supports go, that's like if you want to go Hourglass on Morgana, that's helpful. Although a lot of Morgana that are high-level Morgana players do not get Hourglass. I know everyone always asks me, why aren't you going Hourglass, man? Why aren't you going Hourglass? Because you're not meant to be an initiator who's going to like flash in and dive when you're playing support Morgana. You just peel with your ult a lot of the time, so you use your Q to help peel as well. And Hourglass is a very expensive and selfish item, so most people, you'll find them get like Redemption or Shirelia's, something like that helps the team out a lot more, and that's what you see right here, right? You see a lot of Redemptions, you see a lot of Shirelias, you see very few Hourglasses. Now, you shouldn't always just mimic what top-level people do, and I say that a lot of the time, but you should very, very strongly consider what they do, because they are right most of the time. The only times when I would say that they aren't right, per se, is because the meta is very different in Challenger level play than it is in like Silver, Gold, Platinum, really anything that's below Challenger. And so sometimes you need to think, for example, a lot of them like to get Eye of the Watchers, but they can depend that their AD carry is not going to be a total turkey, right? So they can depend, okay, they're going to help me trade in lane, so I'm going to get enough trades in to where I'm going to get my wards in a reasonable amount of time. Whereas if you have like an AFK ADC in Gold who just farms, if you're lucky, and doesn't do much else, and you're trying to go up there and trade by yourself on some champions, you won't be able to do it because you're just going to get pushed around because it's basically a 1v2 lane, and so that means you won't get your wards until like 15 to 20 minutes into the game. Right, and so it's a much bigger risk to run Spell Thieves versus Coin in lower elo, because Coin is going to guarantee you that you're going to get your wards faster, that you're going to get those coins more often. So it's a lot better when you can't count on your AD carry to be aggressive with you in lane to get these spell thief procs. So that is one thing that's different about sort of higher elo and, you know, people that are, you know, gold, plat, silver, bronze, that type of stuff. Okay, but this is not different. I think the lack of Hourglass is not different because theoretically it applies to all elos. You want team fight items as Morgana. You shouldn't have to be the one that flashes in and ults. Now, is it nice later on if you want to get Hourglass, or if they have a super fed Zed or something like that, like an AD assassin? Is it nice to get Hourglass? Sure. That's why I'm saying it's a minor buff to her, but it's not going to move the needle so much that it's going to push her ranking up that much. Although there are some changes here in a second that do move her up a little bit. So it's nice. It's helpful. Fiddlesticks is someone, obviously, if you like Fiddle support, this is extremely good news for Fiddle. You get a little bit more AP on the way up. You get cheaper cost. Now, he is someone who wants that Hourglass ASAP because he is someone that wants to jump in the middle and start a fight, ideally. So that's very good on him. Twin Shadows gets an extra 10 AP. There aren't a lot of people that build this right now. Bard is someone who comes to mind, which we'll talk about here in a second, that really likes this item, just because other like plus healing and shielding items aren't amazing on him, and tank items aren't amazing on him. So he gets to build these kind of utility items that just help his team out with mobility in different ways, because that's really a lot of what he's all about. It's just mobility, roaming around, and trying to make plays off of his strong mobility. So Bard's going to like this. You know, there might be some Zyra builds that would like this potentially if you need that extra scouting early on. You know, there are a few niche champions that might get this every now and then, but it's not a super strong item. But on Bard, I think it's becoming a standard item. So I think this buffs Bard more than anything else, although once again, not to an insane degree. Spellbinder, most supports aren't going to get that. Rylai's nice for people who would get this, so people who are going to get Leandri's Rylai's, primarily like Zyra, Brand, they get a little boost here. Not a lot of supports are going to get Ludens, but, you know, maybe if you want to play Lux support or something like that, or Vel'Koz, maybe this works. AP supports get a little bit of a buff here. People who get pins, so once again, Brand, Zyra get a little buff. A lot of champions got some mana changes, so Brand is going to get, you know, an extra 2 mana per 5 here, but he's losing a lot of base mana over time. So this will give him a little bit of an advantage, like maybe levels 1 to 4, but then after that, he's going to be a lot harder up for mana. Brand is a mana hog too, and so this is bad news for him later on. He's not going to have as much mana to do as many rotations in a team fight, so that can be problematic for Brand later, but it's a little bit better for his laning phase. Similar with Fiddle, but Fiddle doesn't have as many mana problems because usually he just goes in with his ult, and, you know, that kind of decides the fight is how well he uses his ult, so not as big of a deal there. Vhagar, once again, similar to Fiddle, the fight's usually over before you run through all of your mana, so it's not a big deal there. Now, Zyra, this one is pretty insane. This is a big deal because Zyra got 5 extra mana per 5. She has 15 mana per 5. That's more than Janna or Sona or any of these, like, traditional, you know, enchanter mages, which doesn't make any sense. Like, and I played a game as Zyra on Viewers Night last night. We played a little bit on the patch, and this is crazy. Like, you can use your Q a lot early in the game. Now, is her base mana going to be lower, you know, over time? Sure, just like Brand, but she doesn't have mana problems like they do because most of her damage comes from her plants, which are free. Your W is free, so in a lot of team fights, yeah, you do your full rotation, your ult, your E, your Q, but then the rest of the time, you're just pressing Q, you know, spamming plants, and it's not that expensive. So, she doesn't really need a lot of mana later on, and early on, she doesn't need extra mana regen, but now she has it, and so you can spam your Q a little bit more liberally, especially really early on. Then in those first couple of levels, you can really spam that Q and push the wave and potentially, you know, poke people a lot more with your Comet. So, yeah, she definitely, now once again, that's not a game-shattering buff, but it's really nice. It helps out her early game pressure, and then, you know, she has some of those other items up there, like the Rylai's buff, that help her out a little bit. The other one is Morgana, who is already really strong right now in this meta, and this is going to allow her to spam her W a lot more in lane just to push. So she doesn't have huge mana management problems. She doesn't really need that. But now you can be a bit more aggressive with how you're using your W to push lane. So I think that's very nice. It's going to help with when you put her with Kate, which is one of the really popular combinations right now, so they can just push in a tower faster. So yeah, this definitely helps out Morgana a little bit too, as does the Hourglass if you want to go for that build, although you don't have to. So yeah, a lot of these are aligning nicely for Zyra and Morgana specifically, because she also got like an extra, 3.5 mana per 5 early, which is pretty good. I don't think there was much. They minor nerfed Kate, doesn't matter as far as supports go. They did nerf Kai'Sa quite a lot, so some of the hyper scaling supports lose a little bit on that. So, like your Janna and your Lulu lose a little bit of equity because of that, a little bit of value because people are probably going to double down on the very strong early game champions a bit more. We might see some more Dravens. We might see some more... Draven's really like a one-trick champion, though. People are either going to play him or not, so probably not there. We'll see a lot more Caitlyn's, I think. I expect Caitlyn to be banned potentially more as a substitute for Kai'Sa bans. She's just very frustrating to play against. And they did kind of nerf Jin's interaction with Gensu's, but I expect him to still be pretty popular too. They nerfed Ezreal quite a lot with the tier, I think, so people might hop off of him. So I think everyone's going to be piling onto Caitlyn more than they already are. So that is one thing to be aware of, is supports that are really good with Kate are going to be a little bit better. Supports that were good with Kai'Sa but not as much with Kate will fall a little bit. That's not going to affect the meta too much, but it's just something to consider, is that there will be more early game emphasis, probably, at least a little bit. Kennen's interesting. We'll see if he makes it into the AD carry slot or not. I do think that building like an on-hit Kennen build bot lane with something like Gensu's Hurricane, Blade of the Ruined King could be a build. I've been tracking this over the last couple of days to see what's happening with Kennen. I think he'll definitely be back top lane as a split push threat. I'm just not sure about bot lane. People are toying around with him. They're trying it out. I'm not entirely sold yet. When they do the crit rework, you might see some shuffling around next patch on Kennen. People were saying it was going to be the death of crit champions. I'm not entirely sure that that's true, but they are increasing costs. And remember what made crit very powerful, because crit wasn't really a thing in the spring of 2017. It was all about Blade of the Ruined King builds, right? Everyone was getting Blade of the Ruined King, Hurricane, all of that kind of stuff. It was all Blade Hurricane builds. And a lot of Ezreals, Lucians, Varus's, stuff like that. What made crit come back, or one of the big reasons, is they lowered the cost on everything. So they lowered the cost on the Zeal items by 100 or 200 gold. I don't remember off the top of my head. And they lowered the cost on Infinity Edge by like 200 or 300 gold. So now they're making Infinity Edge a much later item that you will not want to rush. And so if you want to go Infinity Edge now, and some people do this anyways, I guess you could go BF Sword and then like Rapid Fire Cannon or Static Shiv and then finish Infinity Edge. Now it is more expensive, and I'm not going to go... I'll make a whole video about some of these new items. I know people are asking me about the AD changes. I'm going to do a separate video about that. But I'm just saying that the main thing that you need to take away right now is it doesn't affect this patch, but Kennen, keep an eye on him, because when they shuffle that around, if we're shifting more towards an on-hit type of meta, you might see him bottom lane more. It's just it's going to take people a while to figure out what the itemization would be if you want to do that, and how does that line up against other champions. So I think that champions like Kog'Maw would be the most immediate beneficiaries if they change it to an on-hit build. Kog'Maw, maybe Varus, although he got nerfed a little bit. But Kennen is possibly in the conversation for certain kinds of comps. So keep an eye on Kennen, but I don't think he's going to make a huge splash on this patch, but I think people will explore with him. Leona got a minor buff here, not going to matter that much. If you play Poppy support, it's bad news for you. A lot of nerfs to her, but whatever, it's not going to matter. Sona change doesn't matter. Like, they're trying to justify, oh, you do an extra 5 damage on Power Chord. You get your Power Chord every 3 spells, so maybe you do a little bit more. You do have some more base attack, but this does not make up for the fact that you're losing tier, basically, and that's a huge, huge hit to Sona. So I think that's Sona, if anything, and I brought her down on my list a little bit for that reason. Okay, so that's pretty much it as far as support. Oh, the Chrysalis is back, so they did fix the bug. I didn't mention it on the last patch. I wasn't aware of it. I don't think they mentioned it, but someone told it to me during the patch cycle. And so what happened with Chrysalis is you would always get HP while you were in combat. It would revert your AP and turn it back into HP when you're in combat. So effectively, you just had 60 HP the whole time, which is not nearly as valuable as getting that 20 extra AP. So that once again is going to become kind of the premier build on a lot of enchanters, is that people are going back towards this Chrysalis kind of build, and especially because there's going to be a lot more emphasis on early game fighting and less scaling because Kai'Sa's falling off. You're going to see a lot more Caitlyn, Jhin, Draven, and Ezreal's fallen off too because of the tier nerfs. So Kai'Sa and Ezreal were more sort of mid to late game champions, if you want to call Ezreal any kind of game champion. I don't know. I like Ezreal. Ezreal's fun. If I was playing AD carry and you just put all of the numbers aside, who would be the most fun to play? Who would I like to play? It'd probably be Ezreal, right? So I know I kind of give Ezreal a hard time, a little tongue-in-cheek on the channel, but he's had a really hard time. He had his day in the sun earlier in the semester. Earlier in the season, he had his day in the sun. He was very good, but unfortunately they have shut that down. I don't think he needed the nerfs as much as they've been nerfing him. I think the Klepto nerfs probably would have been fine, but anyways, it doesn't matter what I think. It is what it is right now. So he's in a bad spot, so that means that people are going to be going towards more early game pressure 80 carries. And Chrysalis is a great sort of counter to, or at least something that helps you stay in the game. When you go Bone Plating plus Chrysalis, it's a pretty good combo. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here to the tier list proper. Now that I've spent 15 minutes sort of talking about the patch notes, rehashing those. If you want the full details on that and how it affects other roles, be sure to check out that link there. Okay, so as far as my methodology, and people always ask me about this, they're like, what about this champion? What about that champion? But what about this? What about that? Keep in mind, the methodology here is I do a 3-tier system. Tier 1 is always 5 champions, no matter what. Tier 2 is always the next 10 champions, no matter what. And then Tier 3 are the next 10 champions, no matter what. Just so that it makes it very clear like how I'm ranking them, and it just so that tier 1 means the same thing from patch to patch, right? Because I know some other tier lists, and I've done this in the past, where maybe I have tier 1 as only 3 champions, maybe I have it as 5 champions, and just like what's the gap between those champions. So I've just tried to streamline it here just to make it a little more clear. So I'm not saying that just because Janna and Soraka are on the same tier that they are equal, right? Janna is above Soraka, even though they're on the same tier. So that's how I do it, is I try to rate it going down like that, rather than just saying, okay, everyone in tier 1 is the same, or everyone in tier 2 is the same. Another thing to keep in mind is a big part of this is unique power. I put a lot of weight on that. So if there's a champion that does something that another champion does better, then the secondary champion is going to fall down quite a lot. So if there's someone who's just like the premier engaged champion right now, then other champions that are kind of secondary, like okay engagers, often fall down a little bit. So if a champion can be replaced, if they don't have a unique pick in the meta, then they'll often fall down. That doesn't mean that they're terrible or unplayable. It just means that they're going to be a little bit further below champions that can't be replaced, champions that have a very unique niche where they can fit into the meta. Okay? So, for example, someone like Nami, I think, especially with the nerfs to tier, is going to outclass Sona in virtually every way right now. But, I mean, Sona is going to outscale, but Nami's early game pressure is going to be so much more powerful that I have her up a lot more. So that doesn't mean that Sona's terrible. It just means that I think that Nami is a better replacement pick for what Sona wants to do, at least pressuring in the early game. To some extent. Zyra is another great example here. I think Zyra just in almost every situation is better than Brand. Now, I know people will argue with me a lot about this, but Zyra's, I think after playing a ton of Zyra and playing some Brand, that her damage is just much more consistent in lane. It's a lot easier to land your poke. She has really good vision control with her plants. She has similar teamfight damage, but I would say it's a lot easier to focus that on a single target, so Brand is going to bounce around for a lot of his damage in teamfights. So he might do even a little bit more, depending on how your bounces are and if people spread out when they explode. He might do more in just a clear 5-on-5 teamfight, but Zyra is going to be a lot better at making sure that you deal a ton of damage to that one target. She's better at assassinating people out of bushes than Brand is most of the time. She has better mana management. So they're both AP, high-pressure lane supports that have really good teamfight damage and really good scaling off of low gold, because they have really high base damages but relatively low scaling in terms of AP, and that's why you don't see them in the mid lane. Also, they're really dangerous. But that's why Brand is down here. It's not that Brand is terrible or unplayable. It's just that I think Zyra is better than him in almost every situation, and so that's why Zyra's up there like that. So those are a couple of considerations. I also focus on primarily a plat and lower audience. So I'm not talking about professional play. I'm not talking about diamonds. At the same time, I'm not talking about specifically bronze and silver players, right? I will make some mention that these champions are better in bronze and silver. Or these champions are better in like higher elo. But the target audience, sort of the average that I'm going for here, are people that are, you know, plat and lower, right? And really kind of just in the middle there for the most part, with extremes on either sides. Okay, I'm also talking about non-specialists when I do this, so someone can say, oh, but, you know, I one-trick Thresh all the way up to Challenger. It's like, yeah, you can do that, but for most people, I'm talking to the wide audience, the thousands of people that are going to watch this, right? Thresh is not a great pick for everybody. So there are some champions that are really good if you one-trick them. I have a special one-trick video on the channel for that, if you're interested in that. But primarily, I'm highly, you know, I'm putting a lot of weight on, can this champion be relatively strong with just a moderate amount of play if you're not a one-trick. Now, some of the one-trick champions like Thresh are relatively high-rated, like tier 2, because they are very powerful in one-trick hands. But that is definitely something that I take into consideration when weighting this, is how good is it for the vast majority of the people watching this that want to pick it up, play a few games, figure it out. Right? Not people who have 2,000 games on the champion over 5 years. So just keep that in mind as well. And then finally, I very highly value what I'm thinking of as potential power, and I weight that much heavier than popularity or statistics. So I do look at stats. I do think that's interesting to look at. I do look at popularity, how often you see a champion, but primarily I'm saying, okay, with this champion's kit in this specific meta, this is how powerful they could be. This is how many situations they're useful in, and that's what I'm judging. So you will see champions on here that I will put on here that might be a 49% win rate. I'm going to have them rated higher than another champion that's a 52% win rate sometimes. And that's just because I think a lot of players don't unlock the true power of that champion. They're just not playing the champion correctly. They're not itemizing or ruining it correctly. They're picking it into the wrong matchups. Who knows? But I go based on what I think is strong for the current meta. So I'm not just assuming that everybody has it right, that everybody's completely figured out the game and the statistics never tell a lie. Right? Because obviously that's not true to an extent. So you have to choose. Do you want to like make your tier list that's just a rundown of only stats themselves, or do you want to think critically about it and say, you know what, I think some champions are overrepresented on stats, I think some champions are underrepresented on stats, and this is how I'm going to interpret it. So I choose the latter. That's how I do it. So, you know, before someone comes in and says, but this champion that you have is tier 3 or whatever is 52%, and this thing you have in tier 1 is 49, it's like, okay, that's fine. There could be disagreements. And there can be flexibility, too. You know, even though I have Zyra, you know, a little bit over Soraka, you could definitely make an argument that Soraka, you know, could even be top 3. So there's a little wiggle room on this, right? It's just to get you started, just to get you thinking about what's going on in the meta and which champions are strong and why. That's the goal of the tier list, okay? So I know everyone would have their own different individual tier list, but that's what I'm working with, just to give people some starting ideas for, you know, how to think about the meta. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here, though. So tier 1, still Janna. I think I had Nami on the last one. I moved Janna up a little bit more. We're seeing some more engaged champions, particularly out of the jungle. And a lot of Namis that I'm playing against, and a lot of Namis in general, just are not pressuring as much as they should in lane. So Nami can do very well in the lane with her pressure, but if you're just going to sit there and farm off with a Janna, which seems to be the default in a lot of lanes, at least that I've been playing with. Now, this has been a pretty wacky week, but I will say that particularly at lower elos, and people say that, oh, well, you can't play Janna in silver and bronze. She's no good. You have to play a high-pressure AP support. It's like, well, high-pressure AP supports are all right, but keep in mind also in lower elo, people aren't going to pressure Janna in lane. Most of the time, they're just going to sit there and just farm off, and that's exactly what Janna wants. She just wants a nice, peaceful lane where she has moderate harassment, where she can drop her W on people every now and then, and she wants a nice, relatively peaceful lane. She wants to transition into the mid-game, where she's really fast, she gets her Redemption, she gets her Ardent Sensor, and she just outscales the other supports. And she's really good at the Clown Fiesta because she's very safe, she has really long ranges on her spells, she has extremely high scaling on her shield, on her R, and she has a lot of disruption and peel that's very good against assassins and divers in the mid-game, and she's the queen of the Clown Fiesta for those reasons. So she historically has a very weak early game, It's a little bit better now than it has been in the past, but because of some runes like Aerie. But, you know, still, she's a mid to late game champion. So if you're at an ELO where people just sit there and farm the wave and they don't fight each other very much, she's going to be really strong. And also, even at a pro level, I think I saw the most recent Chinese playoff games, at least one of those games, she was even picked there. So she is even picked at the professional level. So she is sort of the poster child for good and relevant in pretty much any meta, anytime. Her numbers are so strong. She's the most nerfed champion of all time. There was some list about that a couple of years ago. So she's been there since Season 1, nerfed, I don't even know, 30 or 40 times over the years, and she's still extremely strong. So I think that she's the best pick. She's very safe. Yeah, her early game pressure is lacking a little bit, but she has phenomenal itemization compared to other champions. She doesn't care about any of these mana changes. She doesn't need tier. Whatever, you know? She has very good mana management. She can put up some moderate harass, but not that great. But she's just so strong, so safe. It just scales so well into the late game. She's just great. And so, runes that I recommend right now, and since they fixed Chrysalis, I think that Chrysalis is, once again, a very good option. This does shore up her early game specifically against all-in champions. So just Aerie, Mana Flow Ban, Celerity, Scorch. If you're going to lose the lane really hard, so if you have like if it's like Janna, Ezreal, and you're against something like Draven, Leona, if you're going to lose really hard, you can go for Gathering Storm because she scales so well off of AP anyway. So I think this is primarily what I would do. And then as far as recommended items, mobility boots, I'm going to go back to Nomad's Medallion. I need to go back through and type all these out again. And the reason that I go for Nomads, I talked about this earlier, I think, when people were talking about, or when I was talking about how some people thought there would be Frostfang changes. That brings me to an important point here, too. You need to make sure, whenever you're looking at a tier list or patch notes and things, that that you are looking at people who are actually commenting on the real patch notes, not the PBE. If anybody releases a video that tells you best champions or best new builds or items, like what to look out for before the PBE releases, they are lying to you, probably. Okay, so when you see some of these things come out, and I'm not going to list any channels in particular, there are a lot of them that do this. But the patch notes always come out on a Tuesday. So if you start seeing some of these videos pop up on Saturday or Sunday, they do not have access to the real patch notes. They are going based on what's on the PBE, and there is a chance it could be inaccurate. They could be lying to you, okay? And this is very confusing because I had somebody earlier leave a comment on my patch notes video, and they said, I think this is going to be really terrible because these Frostfang, nerfs are really going to hurt a lot of the Enchanter and AP supports. He hadn't read over the patch notes, but he probably watched one of those videos from another content creator out there. And I said, that didn't go through because that was on the PBE. We thought that they were going to potentially nerf Frostfang and take away the mana regen on it, and they decided not to do that on this patch, right? So they didn't do it. They also did not change Rise on this patch. So I know other content creators made entire videos about, oh my god, look at this new Rise with true damage, this, and all this other stuff. That didn't come out this patch either. Okay? So it's really important. I'm not saying just me. There are other great content creators that wait until the patch notes come out. You've got Freak, you have LS, Last Shadow, you have Skara. All of these people do live readings of the patch notes. Now, they don't research it like I do and prepare notes ahead of time, but they do read it and look over, and they give you commentary on the actual patch notes, okay? So it doesn't have to be me. Of course, I would want it. I want you to look at my patch notes, obviously, and my tier list and all that stuff, but make sure you're getting reliable, solid information from people who wait until they see the actual patch notes and don't try to cheat and get ahead before the patch notes come out just so they can get a couple extra views. All right? So be clear about that if you see that type of stuff that is PBE, it is not necessarily what happens on the patch notes. Now, is 90% of the changes the same on most patch notes? Sure, the PBE does translate very well over to the patch notes, but it's not always the same, and sometimes there are really big things that change. There's some stuff that shows up that weren't in the patch notes, and other things, like I just mentioned, that get omitted that were on the PBE that don't show up on the actual patch notes. So, anyways, Janna, really strong. Nomad's Medallion, okay, that's why I got off on that tangent there. Because Frostfang, people thought that it was going to get nerfed a lot. It did not, but Nomads is becoming more popular. A lot of people are picking this up, including myself, because if you can't count on your AD carry, if you're not sure how they're going to perform in lane, then you really want nomads to make sure that you're able to get those wards by 10 minutes. Okay, and this is for pretty much all in chat. There are a couple exceptions. I mean, like Zyra, Brand, people who really have to do a lot of damage early game. You know, that's a good option. Or if you're just very certain, if you're playing with a duo, or, you know, you look up your Draven on op.gg and you know this guy likes to rock and roll early on. He's like a 65% Draven. You know you're going to fight. You can get Frostfang, but just understand that if you end up in a losing lane or with an AD carry that's auto-filled or they just aren't being aggressive, then that's going to limit the amount of aggression you can do in lane. So there are some lanes with some champions where you can go up and 2v1 the lane, sort of. But in most lanes, it's very hard. If you try to go up and harass, you know, with your Janna W, and the enemy Caitlyn and Karma hit you in the face with a couple of autos and a spell, and your Kai'Sa's just sitting there auto-attacking the minions and is not walking up to help you trade, you know, you hitting them for, you know, like 100 damage with a W and an auto is not worth taking 300 damage back. So then you can't harass anymore. You just have to sit there and farm, and you never get to use your Frostfangs. And so you don't get your wards until like 20 minutes into the game. So Nomads is just a lot safer. It's a lot more secure. It is a little bit less damage in lane, but if you're just not confident that your AD carry is going to help you harass enough to make Nomads worth it, then I would go, or to make Frostfang worth it, then I would go with Nomads. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Alright, so Nami, number 2 slot. Moved her down a little bit. She still is quite strong, but it's sort of the problem that I just mentioned before, whereas if you have AD carries that don't help you come up and harass, Nami is a champion who kind of can 2v1 the lane, but if you don't end up with a CS advantage, then she falls behind Janna, which is why she's a little bit back. So, you know, sometimes you can just go up and harass a lot with your W and your autos, but if they take a Doran Shield, you know, if they take Fleet Footwork, then it's going to be really hard for you by yourself to create an appreciable CS difference. They're just going to sit there and auto, they're going to take some of your harass, and it's just going to be a farm off. And if the CS is even, or if, you know, your AD carry is actually down 10 or 15 CS, then Nami really failed because she needs to get ahead early on. Now, on the flip side, if it is a very tough lane, Nami can be really good and graceful at failing because you can heal your ally, and Nami can't heal. So if you're constantly getting pushed in by that Caitlyn plus Karma or whatever, and your Ezreal's trying to sit there and farm under tower and they take a lot of harassment, then you can actually heal up with the Nami. Now, is that the best way to use her? No, that's going to be very inefficient, but it's better than if you have Janna and you just get run out of the lane, you can't heal anybody. At least you can stall for a little while and kind of stop the bleeding, and then at least a little bit patch it up and just hope that your mid lane or your top lane can get enough of an advantage to make up the beating that you're taking down in bot lane. So Nami is alright. She's versatile like that. She can stall out the game. She does have pretty good hard CC options later on. But, you know, her wave is somewhat unreliable if you don't have a lot of other CC on your team. People can dodge it. People can flash around it. So her wave is a little bit less reliable. She doesn't have as much scaling with plus healing and shielding because all she has is her W, whereas Janna has her E and her R. And she has a really hard time with, like, some potential super hard engaged champs. So Zac in particular is pretty rough, and he's becoming a bit more popular. And he's very pesky, but, you know, Zac, if he engages on you, it's a lot harder. Like, you can press R when he's flying through the air, but it does have a cast time on it, and sometimes it's too late, whereas Janna's is instant, knock him out of the air. Also, like, assassins might kill the person. Like, if Shaco just shows up on your AD carry on the backline, they might kill that person before you can land your bubble or ult, or maybe even get your heal off with your W. Whereas, once again, with Janna, you press R instantly. It knocks everybody back and heals your AD carry for a ton. So Janna just has much faster cast times, much better reaction times to a lot of those hot situations from people who are trying to engage, and some of those assassins that are trying to kill your backline. So I think that makes Janna a little bit stronger, but Nami does have a lot of pressure. If you have a heavy pressure early lane, you know, you have a Draven, Jhin, something like that, then Nami is going to be very good early on. So she's still a really strong pick. It's just, I feel like Janna is a little bit better a lot of the time just because Janna has that inevitability, right? She's going to be an unstoppable force later in the game if it goes to mid to late game, no matter what. Whereas Nami is going to get outscaled potentially by some other picks on this list, like Janna, like Lulu, like Soraka, to some extent like Sona. They're all going to outscale her. So you really have to get an advantage early on. So she is very good. She does scale pretty well, but just not quite as much as some of the other choices out there. All right. As far as Morgana goes, she is rising in popularity quite a bit, and she's getting pretty strong. She did get the extra mana regen, which is going to let her spam her W in lane. And pull her up here. And you are seeing kind of a rise of CC champions to counteract enchanters. So you're seeing more Leonas coming into play. You're seeing more Threshes. At least I'm seeing them in my games. As sort of a reaction to enchanters, people naturally want to play hard engaged champs. Seeing a few more Blitzcranks, Alistars, things like that. She's very good against engage and stopping CC. So she gained a lot of power when Tahm Kench got nerfed a lot as well. So she's been good. She was at my tier 1 last tier list as well. So she is the premier anti-CC champion. She also benefited, like we said, from the Zhonya's. She also doesn't have a lot of mana problems, but she got free mana regen off of this patch. So now you can spam your W to help push the lane even more. So she's very good. She has versatile build. You can get AP if you want. A lot of people will just get sort of standard enchanter items. Shurelya is very popular on her. It does let you stick to people a little bit better with soul shackles, which is nice. And she does have nice CC, so she can start fights. She can use her Q to try to start a fight, and then she still has the defense of her Black Shield and ult, even if you miss your Q. So it's not great if you miss your Q, but you still have some other defenses at your disposal if people want to try to counter and engage on you after you miss it. So I think she's a really good pick, particularly into things engaged champions. Alistar, Rakan, Thresh, Leona, a lot of those champions are going to be very good against her. Now, she can have a problem against Janna. Janna's going to outscale her because her shield doesn't have any sort of AD steroid on it. She doesn't scale with plus healing and shielding. But at the same time, Janna can't really stop what she's trying to do, so Janna doesn't have a lot of great responses to Q. You can knock people back with your ult and try to heal through it, but a 3-second bind, unless the Janna has a Mikhail's, which usually she won't get until like the second or third item, if at all. Some Jannas won't even buy Mikhail's. Then your peeling's not going to matter because the duration is so long that they're still going to kill the person if they don't have a Quicksilver Sash or if you don't have a Mikhail's. So, yeah, Janna does outscale in theory, but the Q is still pretty good against Janna. And Janna doesn't have a way to really break this shield that well. And so if the AD carry, if the Morgana AD carry gets ahead or scales harder, so if you have like a Twitch on your team and you're Morgana and they have like an Ezreal Janna, they're not going to have an answer to Twitch. When Twitch shows up with Black Shield, he's just going to obliterate the team and you can't do much about it. So if you have a hyper scaling AD carry on your team and the other team is relying primarily on crowd control to deal with them, then it's not going to work. Now, Morgana's shield doesn't do a lot against the Kha'Zix or the Shaco that try to get onto your back line to kill your AD carry. So that's kind of the drawback, is if they have a heavy, hard-hitting AD assassin type of champion, Zed, who's going to be very popular on this patch probably, Talon, going to get a bit more popular, then that's kind of rough. But she has a really good play. She is very strong. She's pretty good into other enchanters. It's not terrible matchups. So I think overall she's pretty strong. All right, next up we have Zyra. Now Zyra got that huge boost to her mana regen, so you can spam your Q a lot more in lane. She does benefit from the Rylai's in some situations, maybe from Zhonya's. And she's just a great early game bully, so she complements other hardcore early game champions. She's great with Caitlyn, Jhin, Draven, just anyone else who wants to be a bully early game. She's going to be very strong. So she has excellent wave clear, excellent kill threat in lane. Her scaling is kind of suspect when she's paired up against an enchanter because the plus healing and shielding is going to outscale her AP damage. But if you can get enough of a lead early, then she's very strong. Now, the difference between her and Nami is she can actually kill people really easily in lane. So she does a ton of damage, especially at level 6. So the trade-off to that, though, is that she's very, very unsafe. Really unsafe. Like, Nami is a bit faster. Nami has longer spell ranges. Nami has a heal. Zyra is very susceptible to poke. And if she gets caught out, she's dead. She has pretty much no escapes. So she's a lot more dangerous than Nami, but potentially she can snowball a lot harder. So she is really good. Kind of the lower the elo goes, if you practice her, you can climb up a lot. So you can definitely get through like silver, gold, bronze, all that stuff. If you just spam Zyra a lot, you will dominate. I think near the beginning of the season, I had a really rough start. I got placed into gold 2, and then I fell down as low as gold 4 pretty early on in the season. It was absolutely terrible. I think my overall win rate was like 44%. It was like one of the worst loss streaks I've ever had in the beginning of the season. And then I just started playing Zyra all the time, and I ended up going like 65% on Zyra all the way up to like plat 4 or 5, or plat 4 or 3. And then the meta shifted a little bit, and I kind of went away from Zyra and played some other stuff. But I ended up, you know, going from a 44% win rate up to like a 53 or 54% win rate. And a large part of that was because of Zyra, so she is very strong early on. Now, Soraka is kind of an interesting one that's developed. I almost dropped her down a tier because Assassins are getting more popular, and it's very hard to win with her. But there's kind of this newer Soraka build, and I know there's going to be someone out there that's like, Professor, I've been doing that for years. There's kind of this newer-ish Soraka build that I've played against a couple of times. It's very frustrating. It's like an E, like you level up your E early. Some people will max it. Some people will only get 3 points in it and then switch over to heal. But this has become very, very popular, especially among high elo Soraka players. And she has a good win rate, but keep in mind that she's not picked very much either. So she's only picked in specific matchups. But the reasoning behind this, I think, is that your E is guaranteed damage. So you just press E, it hits them. Boom, that's it. And that triggers Scorch, and that triggers Airy on top of them. And in team fights, you can potentially get that double damage as well. If it hits them, you know, does the silence, and they don't move, then it's even more damage. So it's a lot of damage if you chain it together with CC. So if you combine Soraka with something like Jhin, and they Jhin roots somebody, or like Caitlyn traps somebody or something like that, and you throw that silence on top of them, and it triggers twice, it's actually a ton of damage. It's a ton of damage. So, okay, here we go. So that's what I've been seeing, is more people will get 3 to 5 points in Equinox early. So it actually does the exact same damage as your Q. The big difference is this is on a much lower cooldown, and it costs a lot less mana early on. But this can miss. Especially as you go up in elo, people will dodge this a lot. Like, I played some Soraka games where people dodge this all the time. Right? And so that's really frustrating, and it only has 800 range. So that's really frustrating because then you don't get your heal on yourself, and then you're not triggering stuff for your Frostfang. Right? But this automatically triggers on them. There's no way to dodge it. It's not a skill shot. It has 925 damage. So 100% you're doing this damage to them. You're doing the Scorch. You're doing the Airy. This conveniently, the cooldown, once you get it up to 3 ranks, coincides exactly with Scorch. So every time Scorch is up, then you have a really good trade. Also, they can't really trade back when you E them. When you cast your E on them, then they're silenced. So they can't trade back. And they have to run, because if they don't run out of that, then they're going to take a ton of extra damage. So it does a total of, you know, at rank 5, 460 damage with a 0.8. If you hit them with both ends of it. So that's quite a bit of damage. Now, it only deals damage to champions, though, so you can't wave clear with it. So that's kind of frustrating. But it's only 70 mana at all ranks as well, whereas this is cheap at all ranks also, but this doesn't go up, so that's good. And the cooldown actually goes down a little bit. So it's interesting. I haven't tried this yet. I'd be curious to try it out against some matchups just because it's that guaranteed damage. And if you do that, then you only go 1 point in Q in lane, and then, of course, you start getting your W. Maxed out after that. So I don't know, maybe this gives her enough pressure early game to where it might make her a bit more viable. People are rushing Shirelias on her a lot more as well, and that helps keep you a little bit safer. So that's interesting. I don't know why we're seeing barrier. People aren't playing her mid lane. That's a Frostfang. Yeah, I don't really understand that unless they're expecting to get ignited or something. But that is interesting. So a lot of people are going things like Shirelia's redemption to try to give you that health and give you that speed early on so that you can get away from stuff. So it's interesting. It's an interesting build. I still think that she is very vulnerable to assassins, but this does give you a bit more pressure, more guaranteed pressure, especially at higher elos, so people won't dodge her Q. So that's an interesting build that's been popping up lately. So it looks like we're definitely over 30 minutes. We'll see if we can get it done in an hour. I think an hour would be all right. That'd be a baby step, coming down from an hour and a half to an hour. Okay, Rakan is still very good. I have him down a little bit more because it is still relatively hard to hit his Q in lane. The AP ratios are very nice on Rakan, so it does make him, like rushing a Shirelia's or something like that, a lot more attractive. Now, people are actually, it looks like they are potentially, I mean, I know people are playing him in the middle. I think he's still most popular as support, but you are seeing him in the middle a little bit more. Some people do like rushing the Zeke's Convergence. He has a lot of different items. I have an entire guide on him for Season 8, so be sure to check that out. But people look like they do like going Zeke's. Like Zeke Shirelia seems pretty popular. Or at least Zeke's. The reason behind Zeke's is he has a really low cooldown ult. And this is something that gives your AD carry a lot more damage, because it gives him that extra on-hit damage. And it also gives you mana, which is something really nice that you want early on, because he can kind of have some mana problems in some situations. And it gives him tankiness, so it gives him armor and magic resist. So it's a pretty cost-efficient item. That's pretty solid. I do think that the Airy build, and then you end up getting like maybe 3 points of Q in lane. He hopped right into the E. Usually people max the E, but it's just a question of do you want somewhere between 1 to 3 points of Q in lane. And that lowers the cooldown so that you can add in a bit more harass, but it kind of depends on how the game is going. That's interesting that he decided to go with ulti hat instead of the mana regen thing too, but I guess that makes sense because he does have a very powerful ult and it does synergize if you're going to go with Zeke's. And then just resolve something in the resolve tree. So usually bone plating, and then either revitalize, Chrysalis, or Second Wind are all pretty decent items depending on the matchup. So yeah, I think he's pretty good right now. He does have the scaling of an AP Enchanter, but he has the playmaking ability of something like an Alistar, and he has lots of good mobility and escapes. So you shouldn't really be dying on him that much. So I think he's pretty good. You know, his laning phase is still pretty suspect. Like I said, a lot of people are either maxing Q or getting 3 points of Q in lane now just to help him out, just to help him get through the laning phase, and then going something like Bone Plating Chrysalis, and then Mana Flow Ban and Scorch gives him a bit more laning pressure. So I think he's pretty solid overall. He's the best engaged champion out there right now. It's because a lot of the tanks who could engage have been nerfed so much that I think that creates a space for Rakan. So yeah, so pretty solid. Another threat is Alistar. Now Alistar is going to, and then, yeah, I talked about the runes there. So I do have the link to, if you want to see the other runes and items, I've got those linked right here on the list if you want to see it. But I think just looking at kind of pro builds there helps sort of show what I'm talking about as well. Alistar is somebody else who has survived sort of the tank changes because his ult already makes him super tanky, so you don't need a lot of tank items. So you'll see Alistar going for something like a Shirelia's Reverie or, you know, Mobility Boots plus Righteous Glory. Shirelia's is a lot cheaper, so I think more and more people are opting for that. It doesn't give you as many tank stats, but... And then some people are opting just for straight, you know, tankier items like Knight's Vow. But, you know, usually people get some kind of speed increase item, like either Righteous or Shirelia's. And then just kind of go from there. I don't think you need both of those, although some people get both. Ole got both there, so you have super speed. But it's basically with Alistar, you just get mobility boots, you get some kind of speed increase item, you get your forward item, and then you just run around the map, try to pick people off. So he is pretty good at picking off squishies. He preys on if your team has a very high pressure early game and they can shut down a lot of the enemy vision. So, you know, his ranks aren't going to work if they see you coming a lot of the times. So, you know, he's kind of one of those amplifier champions. Like, if your team's ahead, he helps you snowball and win a lot harder. He can also dive starting at level 6 because of his ult. So that's really handy to have in high organized play, but... He's a bit tougher in lower elo because if people don't follow up with your engage, then he's kind of worthless. He has virtually no scaling. He has no plus healing and shielding. He doesn't have any extra ratios with armor or magic resist or anything like that. So he has almost no scaling, but like I said, if your team's really far ahead or you just really need a hard engaged champion, then you can play Alistar. I think that Rakan's better in most circumstances, but Alistar does have his advantages. I think he does more damage early on off of no items in lane, which is Aftershock and use engage with your WQ. So I think he's scarier in lane. I think he's scarier for diving, but late game, he just doesn't have as many tools, and he doesn't have the same kind of scaling that Rakan has. In terms of AP and plus healing and shielding. So he's pretty good, but I think Rakan does what he does just a little bit better. But he is unique in the fact that he can take hits, he can start fights in lane, and he can dive really well. So I have them both up here. And, you know, hard engage is very good against almost everybody up here except... Well, I guess it's not amazing against Morgana, it's not amazing against Zyra. But it is very good against Janna, Nami, and Soraka. Those are two champions that potentially can have very good matchups against them. The Alistar and Rakan against... you know, these enchanters up here. Now, Karma is someone who is kind of seeing a bit more play. She is very good with Caitlyn in particular in push lanes. She can put things like Ardent Sensor on your entire team. I think that tier got a lot worse on her. Not a lot of people were getting tier to begin with. It was a decent option. So you can go something like, you know, Shirelia's Ardent Sensor, and you can get the classic, you know, redemption if you want to. But I think a lot of people were just opting more for the Ardent Sensor, definitely. But then for either Shirelia's or Athene's Unholy Grail is kind of your secondary, just depending on what your team needs. So she is very flexible. She doesn't scale as hard as Janna does. She doesn't have as much peel as Janna does. So she has a much worse matchup against divers and assassins, but she is very good if you have divers and assassins. So she's very good at running that Olaf in the enemy team, or running the you know, the Gnosis in the enemy team, speeding everybody up with Shirelia's in her shield, and she has very, very good pressure early on. So really good pushing power, pretty decent kill threat in lane. So early pressure champion, great complement with other champions that are going to pressure early, like a Caitlyn, like a Jhin, like a Draven. So I think she's pretty solid. She has the best wave clear and early game pressure of any of these champions. Well, maybe not Zyra, but she's safer than Zyra. So she has a little bit less wave clear than Zyra does, I think. But Zyra has to use her main engage to have that wave clear, her E. And Zyra doesn't have escapes like Karma does. So I think Karma's the more reliable wave clear than Zyra, but Zyra does a ton more all-in damage. Okay, Lulu is someone that I had a little bit higher, but I've taken down more over time, and the reason for that is her ranges are very low. She only has 650 range on her shield, which by comparison, I know Janna's shield is like 800, and Karma's I think is also about 800. Nami's wave is like 725, so that's why. Is she's just a lot more dangerous because you have to get in close with that 650. Her W is very good, Whimsy and Polymorph, but you can only do one of them, so you have to choose. Do you want to give the steroids to your AD carry, or do you want to crowd control, you know, the enemy assassin that's trying to get on your team? So I think that makes for some tough decisions with her. She does have some okay wave clear early on with Q, but you usually don't get much more than 1 point in that. And another big knock on her is she doesn't scale as well with plus healing and shielding, because the only thing that benefits from that is her E. Her ultimate is not considered a heal, it's an infusion of health. So it isn't reduced by Ignite, but at the same time, it doesn't benefit from plus healing and shielding. So that is something that's kind of rough on her, why she gets outscaled by someone like a Janna or like a Sona really late in the game, when those champions are going to have like plus 40 healing to shielding, healing and shielding on multiple abilities, and she's only going to be able to have it on her E. But she also does have really good harassment in lane. So, you know, putting auto-attacking, then EQing somebody in lane is a lot of damage. The problem with that is she doesn't have a heal. And so she matches up pretty poorly against Nami early on, because Nami is going to be able to heal herself, and Lulu's damage is not going to stick. Now, Lulu is exceptionally good with champions that benefit from plus, that get a lot of attack speed and have on-hit interactions, because she gives so much extra attack speed with her W. And her picks triggers on every attack, and it's a lot of on-hit damage. You know, in the mid-game, talked about this before on the channel, it's like 70 on-hit damage. So if you have someone that just has a ton of attack speed, that's triggering these constant on-hit damages. Now, it doesn't triggered twice off of Gensu's because it's not considered an on-hit effect. But nevertheless, it's a lot of extra Pix hits. So champions like Kog'Maw specifically, especially people who can get Wit's End, because Pix does magic damage, and so that's going to compound and do even more magic damage off of that. So she's really good with things like Kog'Maw specifically, also pretty good with Twitch, pretty good with maybe like a Tristana, Varus, champions that are going to get a lot of attack speed and have this on-hit interaction. She's pretty strong with. So she's pretty good. She's pretty good. She just has some kind of questionable matchups against Nami in lane, but overall she's strong. It's a little bit more dangerous than some of the other enchanters. Now, Bard is someone who did gain quite a bit on this patch. I get asked all the time about Bard. What do I think about him? Where does he stand in the meta? Why don't I play him more? He has a lot of fun. The problem with Bard historically has been his itemization is pretty weak because he doesn't have any scaling whatsoever on his R or his E. There's no AP ratios. There's no plus healing and shielding. Now, he does have an AP ratio on his W, but it's not that high, and this is the last thing that you max out. Usually you max your Q first, then your E, then your R in almost every situation, so your W really doesn't do a lot later on in the game. And then your Q has a paltry 65% AP ratio, so it's like, it's okay, but it just doesn't scale that well with plus healing and shielding, or obviously not with plus healing and shielding, but not with AP also. Now, his meeps do have a 0.3 AP ratio, and that's like basically every auto you get those in there, so it's okay, but it just means that it's really hard to build him like a pure AP champion. It's really hard to build him like an enchanter. Like, historically, a lot of people will just hold their nose and just buy Redemption Locket because those are just your team fighting abilities, even though he didn't scale that well on him. But he does have a lot of, or he does have really high base damage on just his meeps hitting people. He does a ton of damage. I'm sure everyone knows that if you played against a Bard before. He does a ton of damage off of those meeps, especially if you run Electrocute early on. So he puts a lot of pressure early on. He can roam pretty well. If he starts getting more chimes, he does get more utility as the game goes on. It just always has been a question of sort of ruining an itemization with him. But now, it seems like people have kind of found this, and I've been suggesting this for a little bit. Excuse me. It's not a huge sample size here. He's not played a lot. It's only 130 games in recent times. But a lot more people are considering going this Twin Shadows plus Shurelya's, because these are very good sort of, they give you the AP to increase your damage a little bit, but they're just really good movement-oriented team fight items. So especially Twin Shadows just got a buff that helps keep you safe a little bit, gives you more vision of the enemy jungler, and when you get that slow on them with your ghost from kind of a long distance, then you're able to cast your ult and hit them pretty much guaranteed unless they flash, or unless they have some kind of dash. So it does help set up your ult. It does give you the movement speed also, so that you can rotate around faster, gives you cooldown reduction. So it gives you respectable AP. So overall, pretty good item, especially with the fact that like Redemption and Locket just really don't scale that well on him. So, you know, especially Redemption is much more efficient than Twin Shadows on someone like, you know, Nami, Karma, Janna, all of these champions. But on Bard, because plus healing and shielding is a pretty bad stat, then this looks a lot more attractive. So I think that's nice. It did get a couple of buffs. And then Shurelya's is also pretty good. Gives you that movement speed so you can walk around, get more meeps, roam faster. Gives you the ability power and gives you that speed up so that after you hit with your ult, you can pop this and run your whole team in there to position when they get out of that ult. So I think just, you know, the need for speed build here on Bard, getting the AP, getting the utility, I think has helped clarify sort of his windows of power a little bit more, and has allowed you to leverage kind of his early game power and take that into the mid game a little bit more. So I think he's really good. I've tried the Electrocute build. I'm kind of partial to just going airy myself. I think it's just a little bit more guaranteed for light trades. But, you know, a lot of people are going to go for the Electrocute, they'll go Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Relentless Hunter, and then just Bone Plating and Chrysalis because that helps you trade in lane. So that is really strong, especially if you think you can get 2 autos on somebody or a Q plus an auto without taking too much back. Then this could be a really good choice. And having Bone Plating does help you out with those light trades as well. So I think Bard is in a decent position right now. He is pretty good against Zed as well because you can ult the person that Zed ults and prevent the damage off of his ult. So that's really helpful. It's pretty good against Karthus. So it has a lot of niche uses. Aside from your standard, you can cut off enemies. You can, shut off towers. There's a lot of tricks you can do with his ult. So he is very hard to play. If you're a one-trick Bard, this is a great time for you. But I kind of have him middle of tier 2 a little bit. I rose him up a little bit just because he benefited from some of those other changes that we mentioned. But overall, still not quite tier 1 for most people. But if you're really good on him, then you can definitely gain a lot of elo right now. Blitzcrank's another one that you're seeing a lot more of lately. His hook is obviously really powerful. My problem with Blitz is that he is extremely mana hungry on his rocket grab. It's 100 mana early on. And with a lot of enchanters, taking Chrysalis plus Bone Plating is really hard to convert kills early on in lane. It's because they're going to be too tanky. But, you can't deny it. He is extremely good against enchanters. If he lands a hook on a Soraka or a Janna or a Nami or even a Zyra, then they're going to die. And because tanks just are not popular right now at all, that does make him a lot stronger. So, in any lane. So, I mean, he can even pull a lot of the junglers in right now. He can pull a Kanan if he wants to. He can pull in that Fizz. Now those guys have a lot of mobility to get around, his pull. But there's a lot of squishy champions out there right now that he can just delete when he rocket grabs, ults, then knocks somebody up. They're probably going to die because there aren't tanks out there right now. So I think that he definitely is in a stronger position than he has been in a while. It's just a question of, well, can you hit that ult when a lot of champions are very fast, especially when Coin is becoming more popular. That gives people an extra 10 movement speed on Nomad's Medallion. So they should be able to dodge it better, but will they? We'll see. Also, Ezreal and Tristana are a lot less popular right now, and those were 2 champions that were very good against Blitz. Ez, because he can blink out of the hook, even if he gets hit, and the same thing with Trist. She can buffer her W and jump out, even if you land your hook, so. Those 2 champions, a lot less popular. You're going to be seeing more Caitlyn. She doesn't have a great way to get out of that if she gets rocket grabbed, so I think that the stars are aligning for Blitz right now. He is going to be a bit stronger. Now, Thresh is kind of similar to Blitz in that he has the hook effect, which are good against similar champions and bad against other champions. But Thresh also has more utility. He has his knockback with his E. I'm actually going to throw Thresh up here ahead of Blitz just because he has a lot more utility. He is harder to play, but I think especially with champions like Zac and some of these other hard engaged champs coming into vogue a bit more, Warwick is still really popular, then I think Thresh has the potential to be stronger. Especially now that Coin is really good and you don't necessarily have to go Equinox on him. Some people are still going Equinox, but more and more people are going this Coin build. And I think that that's potentially pretty helpful. Now, his itemization is kind of weird. He kind of suffers from Barditis here in that he doesn't scale very well with plus healing and shielding. And a lot of the really nice tank items, particularly Knight's Vow, do not work very well on him because he's classified as a ranged champion. So I think that his itemization is still a little weird because he can't use Redemption, can't use Knight's Vow, can't really comfortably use Mikhail's. But the core of his kit is still really strong. You just get your mobility boots, Eye of the Oasis, roam around the map, make some hooks, make some plays. He kind of is priced into getting either Zeke's or a Banner of Command. Those are pretty decent on him. Shirelia's is okay. He does have an AP ratio on his ult. I think he has a light one on his E, so he does have some AP ratios. You don't want to get like hard AP items, but Shirelia's is still pretty good. So you can get like a Shirelia's and a Zeke, so when it gets to like 6 items, he is going to get outscaled really hard by enchanters. But kind of early on, he has enough just playmaking potential that kind of like Alistar, where you really want to close out the game quickly if you're playing as Thresh before the enchanters get to their, 4th item. But if you can do that, then he is very strong. He is very nice in lane too. He has a lot of early damage, a lot of early kill threat. If you, flash flay, hook somebody, then they're probably going to die or they're going to be using all their summoners. So I think he's pretty good. You can push also with Caitlyn and then with Thresh's Lantern. You can, pull her to safety if they're trying to come and gank you. So he's a good combination of pressure and safety, but he's the hardest support to play in the game. So you really have to have a lot of practice to understand where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing in different situations, because he can play defense, he can play offense. And then also just to hit his skill shots. Like the hook is the most obvious one, has a delay on it, very slender hitbox, hard to hit. But Flay is also deceptively really hard to hit. Like you have to angle your mouse just right to get the Flay in the correct direction, and it's a really fast skill shot, so you have to do it like right as they're coming in. But he is excellent against some of those hard engaged champions out there. Pretty good. Finally, Leona's making a little bit of a comeback here. She is very good against enchanters, so she's kind of like fills a similar role as Alistar, where she has really nice hard engage. She can roam around the map and try to take over. She has a little bit more scaling, not that much though. You're not going to get a lot of scaling items on her, so you want to close out the game before the enchanters get, all decked out in their awesome items. The difference is she has some of the highest kill threat 2-1-2 in lane. She has 3 different CCs she can use. She does a ton of damage early on. So I did see some Leonas a while back using press the attack, which I thought was really interesting. It made her do a lot of damage, and it gave her that extra little bit of utility and scaling because, yeah, she doesn't have much scaling herself, but if you use press the attack, it does give everyone else on your team that extra 12% damage on that priority target. So I don't see a lot of people doing that. It looks like it's probably still a troll build at high elos, but I saw that at low elos, and I thought it was interesting running a press the attack Leona, but looks like people are still going Aftershock as kind of the default. So she gets a lot better the lower the elo goes because people won't respect her range and the jungler won't necessarily come and camp all the time. So that's the problem with Leona at very high elos, is she's very easy to camp, she's very easy to counter gank. So, if you go in for an engage and you don't have proper warding, then, the jungler can just come out and kill you. Because she does not have a reverse gear. She's very good at going in, she is very bad at going out. So she's an extremely dangerous champion. But if you're ahead, she's one of the best snowball champions in the whole game because she has such a guaranteed, like, hard-hitting engage. It's on a really low cooldown. I think her ult starts off on, like, a 90-second cooldown or something. It's very short. So that is really kind of her contribution. She has a lot of CC. She has a lot of single target damage and pretty decent, like, AoE damage, too, when you think about her passive and her ultimate and her W. And that's kind of what she's all about. But that's really her major thing, is she has a much lower cooldown earlier on a very high-impact start-a-fight type of ultimate than many other champions in the game. And it does so much damage. So I think that especially with Ignite being buffed, Heal being nerfed a little bit, and with how good she is against squishies that don't have a great disengage on her, like Nami and Soraka, it's very good. Even Janna's not as good against her as she used to be. Janna used to have a much faster tornado, so you could knock her out of her E faster. Now you have to almost predict when that E's coming in and tornado beforehand, because whenever she uses her Q, she gets extra range on her auto. So, if you stop that Leona halfway through where she's engaging with her E, sometimes she's still close enough to get her Q off, even though you hit her with the tornado, depending on how fast you do it. So there is still a lot of counterplay to her. I would still prefer Rakan and Alistar most of the times. I think they have more utility than she does. But I think that she is very good in certain matchups. She has a very bad matchup against Morgana, so you need to be very careful because Morg is pretty popular right now, and Morg hard counters her. But, if you are against, if they're playing one of these squishy enchanters, the Janna, Nami, Soraka type, or maybe even Zyra, Leona can definitely be a really good pick, especially at lower elo. Now, Sona just got nerfed really hard with the tier nerf. They did give her a compensatory buff. I don't think it matters that much. She's very squishy. She has really low ranges on her shield. Now, yes, her W can heal people pretty far, right? That other single target, it heals you and one other target for like 1100 range. But the range on her, the shield part of her W is only like 450. And that's really, really close. And you need to be putting those shields on people in fight to get efficiency out of her abilities. Because just healing one person with that W just feels really, really bad. It's not mana efficient at all. So you really want to be close to people with these auras. But they only have 400 range. Not even 450, 400 range. So that's super close, super scary. you just have to get really close to the fight. I mean, Lulu's scary enough at 650, but this 400 in a team fight, especially when they have assassins and like some hard CC champs that can get on top of you, it's very scary in a lot of fights. That's kind of a hidden problem with Soraka too that I don't think I mentioned a lot on the channel, but like her W range is only 550, so that's still very scary. You have to get really close to heal people, and that's very relevant. A lot of the times, I know I personally have been very close to healing somebody and I just can't quite get there fast enough. And that's it. So when you think about someone like Janna, someone like Nami, Janna has the 800 range, Nami has the 725 range on her heal. It makes it a bit tougher, with these champions to stay safe and also heal. So she's okay. She still has really high scaling late game. It's just one of her core items. Tier got nerfed into the dirt, and she can just get out pressured and blown up. If you ever get a hold of her with a Blitzcrank or a Zyra or something like that, she's done. But if she gets to hang out in the back and just spam her W at 30 minutes in the game when she has her Ardent Sensor, Redemption, and like Athenes or something like that, then she's going to be really strong. Okay, and I moved up Fiddlesticks a little bit here into the tier 3. I did move Tarek down. That's pretty much going to be the end of the video. Dang it, I did go over an hour, but we're going to keep it under an hour 30, dang it. We're going to keep it at an hour 10 here. Move Tarek down because he really needs tier, and it's just not a great meta. He doesn't have a good keystone anymore. So Tarek can still win, but it's going to be a bit tougher. The rest of these are pretty much what it was last patch. They're okay. You'll notice it's a lot of tanks down here that are just kind of falling by the wayside, and a couple of, like, second or third string AP champions that are good in certain spots. I explained Brand quite a lot, and I know this will probably be the one people argue with me the most. They'll be like, but he's tier 1, he's so good. I'm like, but Zyra is so much better in every conceivable way to Brand most of the time. He just doesn't do anything that Zyra does better, just about, with the exception of, once again, if they're all clumped up and they all 5 explode on each other, sure, he'll do more damage, but I think that Zyra's better in virtually every situation, even though statistically I think Brand might have a % on her or something. 50, 51, whatever, to 50.9. It's a 0.3, like, greater win percentage on Brand. I just think that Zyra is a lot more reliable than Brand is, but anyways, if you want to disagree about that, that's fine. Whatever, They're both similar. I just think that if you practice Zyra, trust me, you're going to get better results. But Fiddlesticks is someone who's a bit unique, and I put him over Brand just because he is unique. He is very good against assassins. I mean, a 3-second fear is extremely powerful. And they did just buff Zhonya's, which is very good. They did buff Twin Shadows, which he doesn't get all the time, but, like, it's possible to get it sometimes if you want to run people down. It's okay. Now, he's very bad, right, in high elo. He's just too squishy. People can engage on him and blow him up a lot. But I think that you can go something like a Shirelia's or a Twin Shadows, just kind of those utility items, and be pretty strong. He does have pretty good push, so he can push early. If people don't have good vision control, then your ult can be, completely backbreaking, very strong. And you are starting to see him get a little bit more action, right, as far as, like, win rate goes. He still is not picked ever, but he's getting a decent win rate here. So he's an okay, very high scaling AP champion that has a 3-second short-ranged fear. So very bad against ranged champions, but very good against melee assassins. And when I suspect we're probably going to see some more Fizzes and Zeds and Talons and things like that, being able to get Hourglass to help protect you against that and being able to fear could be really useful. But if you fall behind, he feels terrible because you're not going to have the vision control to be able to make really good plays with your ult. So he kind of skates in near the bottom. Realistically, could you put Brand or Veigar or a lot of these other champions up here instead of Fiddle and just move Fiddle to tier 3? Sure, you could. But I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that he did get a couple of light buffs, and I think the meta is starting to favor him a bit more as assassins come into play, as some of these mana-hungry supports in the middle, or mana-hungry AP mages in the middle fall out of favor just a little bit, right? So as you're going to be seeing, a little bit less Rises, a little bit less Cassiopeias, and you might see that traded out for something like Katarina. He's very good against Katarina. Fizz, Zed, we're going to see more of that. That favors Fiddle. So should you pick him every game? No. If you've been wanting to play him for a long time and try him out, is this a good time to practice him? Sure. So I think he needs a little bit of help before he becomes super mainstream. He is very interesting. His kit is very different from a lot of other champions, but he probably still needs a little bit of help, but he's still strong. and, you know, he's an okay option. Okay, so that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to check out over the next couple of days. I'm also going to release top 5 for each other role. I might even do a top 10. I might go crazy, do a top 10 for each other role. I'll try to make those 30 minutes to an hour. So stay tuned for that. You can hear sort of my ideas about the other roles. And then I will make a video about the PBE AD carry changes as well. I'm going to wait. I might do that this like early next week just to kind of see what other changes they roll out there. But be sure, and I'm going to have a lot more support guides coming out too. So I think I've got like Brand, Thresh. I got a lot of stuff coming out. I'll have to check the list, but I'm going to try to release one of these sort of analytical tier list type of videos every day. I'm going to do at least one PBE video every off week when a patch doesn't come out, and then I'm going to try to do some of these guides at least one every couple of days. So I'm going to be cranking out even more and more content for you. We still have a stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, sometime between 9:30 and 10 most nights. And then I'm going to try to release some individual gameplay footage. So if I can't play your favorite support all the time, I'll try to, you know, just get some of those games in there when I get to play something that's a bit spicy on stream or during a dodge or something like that, just so I can give you some different content. But that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.